Welcome back to Managing People and Organizations. Right now we're going to revise the topics discussed in Lecture 2, which was on power, resistance and post-bureaucracy.
So key learning points about that. Well, we studied different approaches to power, and the first one was probably one of the older perspective on power, and certainly from an organization theory perspective, and it was Max Weber's theories of power. And well, the first element of it was Max Weber's was talking about domination and coercive power over others. So the main question was, how do I force, if we want others to do things? How do I create the necessary condition for that? And these conditions were summarized around authority. What are the sources of power, or what are the sources of authority?
Max Weber was a sociologist, and so he was observing what was happening in the Industrial Revolution and how it was transforming society and the need for mass organization. And so he asked the question, what is it that impels people to voluntarily follow the power or the authority of another who leads them or encourages them to do something that they ordinarily wouldn't do? And he comes up with three responses, or three types of authoritative power. And
so the first one was charisma.
mm,
Charisma is about the person, the individual person having something special about them that would attract other. And we will discuss that again around leadership, and that's not the only source of leadership, but it's certainly in some cases a very important one. So first the person and that charisma.
Another source of authoritative power is tradition. And so why we follow a person, why we accept them as our, let us say, head of state or leader in some manner, is because it is a tradition that somebody of a certain family, or through some kind of electoral process, whatever the case may be, they assume that position of authority and we follow them. We accept their command over us.
And the third reason why we would do that is because there are rules and norms that are widely accepted in a specific social system, a country, for example. And that's the rational legal source of authority. So we accept these rules, we accept these norms, and then we will follow what is imposed by the rules, and we'll accept that one person, because of the rational legal system, has to be followed, or that we have to do things a certain way, because that's the shared norm in our society.
This rational legal form of authority was something that Max Weber saw was becoming more ascendant in the society that he was studying at that time. There was a shift from the charismatic power, or especially the traditional power of the kings, towards a rational legal system for organizing society. And he articulated this, or described it specifically in terms of bureaucracy.
And that was studied in contexts such as the Prussian army, which was actually very well organized and a very well functioning bureaucracy, or also the first, in the industrialization and the first modes of organization of these big emerging factories that came with the industrial revolutions. However, we have learned to know that bureaucracy doesn't come without several limitations. One of them is called entropy, which means that the rule becomes, the reason why we do things. We forget about why the rules were created, and we start to have a sort of mystified version of the rule, where we have to obey the rule, we have to have people controlling that we obey the rule. And sometimes, if the environment shifts or if society shifts, we forget that initially there was a good reason, but that reason might not be in existence anymore, and we keep the rule and we keep enforcing the rules, even though the context has changed.
So if you think about that in relation to a traditional system where you have a king who can make up arbitrary decisions, the rules then, or a switch to a rules-based system, is actually, it has the benefit of everything being predictable, of things being rational in a sense. So there's a structure, there's a framework, and it's fair, it's equitable. If you follow the rules, then we expect certain predictable outcomes, and it will happen each time, and it won't discriminate between this person or that person on the basis of one's own dispositions. The rule is the rule. So these are the benefits of the bureaucratic system, but then the rules become important for their own sake. Rule tropism, which holds back innovation, creativity, dynamism, and it holds back actually accounting for the individual and their unique circumstances. So bureaucracy can be very constraining in this way.
And obviously, you then create a situation when an organization will not adapt to change. You also will not benefit from the input of intelligent people that are working there. So in a system that was the system of Taylor, where you were just using people for their muscle power, that could work. In the 21st century, when you hire people for their ideas, for their capacity to learn and to create new knowledge, that starts to be really problematic. And that's why organization theory has progressively shift from a model that was really centered on bureaucracy towards a model where we are going beyond bureaucracy with post-bureaucratic approaches.
In a post-bureaucratic system, we still have rules, but they're taken much more flexibly. They're used as a structure or a framework to hold things together, but there's also an understanding that we have certain objectives, and each individual within the organization should be working towards achieving those objectives. And if the rules get in the way, then we talk about how to bend them, how to change them in order that we can continue to fulfill our objectives. So organizations today need to be much more flexible. They need to be agile and adaptable because our times are changing so quickly. And so the post-bureaucratic system is much more suitable to organizing in our time.
And that means a shift in terms of power and on how do you get people to actually do the things that are going to be to the benefit of the organization. And we're shifting towards, a power of domination, a coercive power, to something that's much softer, so soft power. The recipe for soft power, if you want, are around empowerment. Instead of telling you what to do, I'll make you feel that you have to do it. I'll convince you, and I rely on you to bring good ideas around the table, to do it your own way, as long as it serves the purpose of the organization. So I'll give you this responsibility for achieving a task, while still respecting the rule, but introducing your own ideas and doing it in a way that will be efficient and agile, adaptable to shifts in the environment.
In giving me the responsibility, I feel valued, I feel significant, I feel important, but I also feel much more loyal and trusting. I feel much more committed, and I want to give all of my best ideas and best effort towards the interests of the organization. So you can see how this empowerment is in fact a much more efficient and effective mode of in fact getting people to do what you want them to do. So it's a much more effective and efficient mode of power or control.
And that's what we call pervasive control. So instead of forcing Ace to do something, he's convinced now, and that's pervasive control. All what Ace wants is to do something good that will help me. And that's probably a very good outcome for the organization. If I put several aces together in a team, I'll create a situation that will lead to what we call conservative control, which means that all the aces will check each other and check that they are all aligned with the vision of the organization. And that's the idea of conservative control.
In relation to this, we also have self-surveillance. So rather than the organization needing to appoint a supervisor to manage my team and watch us and make sure we're doing our job, we will be surveillancing ourselves. We will be comparing ourselves against the other team members within the organization, and we're seeing how hard they're working, and we want to make sure that we're able to measure up. And so we'll be surveillancing ourselves to ensure that we are working at a superior level.
And that has been very much criticized by critical management studies, because one could say that in doing that, management is diverting employees from their true interest. It's luring them into accepting that the objectives of the organization are their own objectives. And so that was a big issue that critical management scholars have with these new post-bureaucratic approaches.
part of this we see a blurring between the boundaries of that which is work and that which is home life, or traditionally that which was home life. And so now my friends are also my colleagues at work, and I might even end up spending Christmas with work colleagues rather than with friends and family. And the same kind of loyalty and trust that I had for my friends and family, I might now also have for my work colleagues and the organization itself. And so the organization is able to leverage that loyalty and that commitment, which was previously reserved for intimate family and friends, towards the interest of the organization as well. And that can be problematic because there are things that happen in our family that we might overlook, that should not be overlooked in the organizational context, particularly if unethical practices develop. With our friends and family, we might try to help somebody work with those or work around them, but we might keep it quiet as well. That should not be kept quiet in an organizational context. These things need to be brought to light. They need to be addressed because organizations are accountable to the broader community.
And I guess that's one of the key debates here. We might start with the second one, which is a balance between bureaucracy and post-bureaucracy. So in terms of the managerial perspective, the question would be what's the most effective. In terms of an employee or you say duty of care perspective, is what's acceptable. How much pressure can we put on somebody to integrate in themselves the objectives of the organization? So there is a fine-tuning of what's the best management practice, but there's also a really more deeper ethical questions about what we can do and what we can't do in terms of soft power and post-bureaucratic approach.
Through the course of this subject, we will be emphasizing these types of debates and critical issues. There's no simple answer to them. We want you to reflect on them, and as you go into the world to take up work in organizations as managers, to be a reflective manager who is aware and conscious of these debates and able to engage with a sensitivity to these issues.
Another important question that we raised around power is that power can often trigger resistance. So if you don't accept authority, or if you don't accept that you have to do these things that you have been empowered to do, well, that can trigger resistance. And we discussed several cases where resistance could actually be absolutely necessary. When management is doing the wrong thing, somebody has to do something about it, and that can be the role of whistleblowers, people who come with, who denounce bad things happening in organizations, maybe by giving it to media or giving the, turning to some state agency. And so, but there's also the idea of positive resistance, constructive resistance, where, we tend to think, if people don't want to do what we want as managers, that's really bad. Well, there might be a very good reason. There might be a loyalty to customers. There might be a stress for some people in the organization that's created unnecessarily. So again, one thing that we have talked about a few times, several times during the lectures, is the importance of listening and of taking resistance as maybe something that often can be a positive contribution to the organization.
And so whereas resistance is generally framed as negative from a managerial perspective, we would like to open that debate up, open that discussion up, where organizations can actually learn to encourage many voices within the organization for people to actually feel empowered to speak up against even management decisions, so that these ideas can be brought out into the open and we have a greater chance or greater opportunity to actually benefit from the perspectives of the employees and address real issues that are there rather than keeping them suppressed and repressed.
That was it for lecture 2. Thank you.